Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a Christmas tree angel with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Let's go over brushes and colors. There are a lot of colors in this and a lot of brushes. However, a lot of these colors can be optional. Some of these brushes are also optional. So we have Mars Black, Brilliant Yellow Green. I ended up not using, but it is a color you can use to kind of brighten up the pine needles in the tree if you want. Phthalo Blue is not optional. It's how we get that gorgeous blue background. Light pink I used in the angel's face and hands. Hooker's green hues, pretty solid color for our Christmas tree. Deep violet is optional, so if you want to do no purple ornaments, you don't have to use the purple. Napthol Crimson is also used in the ornaments, so ornaments can be custom colors. You don't have to use that red. Primary yellow is pretty much a required color for the trumpet and her hair. Raw sienna, I used some of that darkness in for hair, a little bit in the wings. Titanium white you'll need. Gold is an optional color, so I don't know if you can see this on camera, but I did some gold accents and it turned out really pretty on her wings. And then there's some gold accents in the Christmas tree as well. But gold is also an optional color. If you want, you can just use raw sienna, which is a pretty close color to gold, but it won't have that metallic sheen to it. Brushes. So I used a toothbrush. Toothbrush is optional, but this gives you a little bit of fun splatter in the sky. Number 4 round brush, use with a lot of this painting. 8 round is an optional brush. I only use this brush for the fine detail work in the twinkling stars. That one's an optional brush. A 12 bright brush is a very handy brush to get that kind of dry brush technique in the angel's dress. A 3/4 wash brush is a very essential brush for our background. And then I love using this angle brush for painting the pine needles on the Christmas tree. We're going to paint all those individual pine needles. So let's go ahead and get started. I am using an 11 by 14 blank white canvas for this, and I'm placing it in vertical mode. You can also do this on any size canvas. You don't have to do 11 by 14. And so we have black, blue, and white. It's phthalo blue. And a 3/4 flat brush, nice and clean. If you want, you can put a little bit of water on your brush. Let's mix about 2 parts blue to 1 part black. It's going to make a really, really dark blue color. So we're going to do this background, and we really want to have the edges of our canvas be very, very dark, and we want a really bright blue color in the center. That's going to create that beautiful contrast in this painting for our Christmas tree and angel in the center. It's going to make it look like that's glowing. And in order to achieve that effect, we want dark on the edges and we want brightness in the center. So big, wide paint strokes going in different angles. It's almost like you're scribbling this color onto the canvas. Get that filled up. So I did a layer of blue and black on the bottom, a layer of blue and black at the top. I'm kind of double loading my brush in blue with a little bit of black. You just want to try not to use too much black because it kind of will take over fast. Phthalo blue is already a really dark color as it is. So you can blend your colors on the canvas. You have little areas that might be more dark, little areas that might be more light. Leave the center of the canvas blank. So you're doing all of the edges. You're going inwards like 3 or 4 inches towards the center, but leave white space in the middle because we'll be blending white in the middle. Almost looks like there's already an angel on our background with the white space left over. So you want to do this pretty quickly before your blue and black dry because we're going to be blending wet on wet. I'm going to do a little bit more blue on the edges, and again leave the middle part with no color right now. So when it looks about like this, and of course yours is gonna look different from mine. Without rinsing the brush, grab some white on your brush, and we're gonna blend the center with the white. So as you add white to this, blend it with the edges of that dark blue. Be very, very careful when you're mixing that white in there. Sometimes if we add way too much titanium white to our brush, it ends up being stronger than our dark color, and then it just kind of takes over and you have blobs of white you got to deal with. So little tiny bits of white on your brush at a time. You can adjust it as needed, but you're filling in the rest of this, and we'll blend this a little bit further. We just want to get all this filled up for now. So we have this really bright blue center right now. Adding white to phthalo blue really makes it a bright, pretty blue color. So once you do that, you want to do your kind of in-between color. So I grabbed more phthalo blue on my brush just now, and I'm going to go back. And so where that kind of white kind of meets the dark, I'm just kind of brushing over that lightly. Keep in mind that your background doesn't have to be perfect. It's not really going to be super noticeable in the end because of all of the details in our front part of the painting. So the Christmas tree, the angel, you're not really going to be focused much on the background at the end, so you don't have to kind of worry about making your background look perfect. I like the look of big choppy brush strokes. It makes it look expressive. If you want to blend it out further and smooth it, you can just keep working that paint. You also want to be careful not to over blend it. So we want to keep in mind that we want our edges to be nice and dark. So if needed, you can go back and add a little bit of black to your brush and kind of blend that black a little bit more on the sides so we have that nice dark color on the sides of our background. Be careful not to add too much black and white to your brush, and it'll kind of make it look too gray. And just gently brushing this, blending it. You might find that you want to maybe rinse your brush and kind of start over, or wipe your brush off if it gets overloaded with paint, because sometimes it's hard to blend if your brush just has too much paint color on it and it's not going to do what you want it to do. So I rinsed my brush off completely, and I'm going to work a little bit more in the center and add a little bit more pure white right in the center without that black that was on my brush. So that was helpful to rinse it off. I'm just adding a little bit more brightness in the center and blending it out. A little bit more brightness, blending it out. And as long as you have a bright center and dark edges, you are good to go. So then we can kind of decide, oh, I want this to go this way. It's a little bit brighter on top. I think it would look better because the angel's going to be on top. So I turned it that way. You can kind of decide which way you want it. And right now I'm going to do some little splatters with the toothbrush. So this is just my paint toothbrush. And I like to wet it first, but not dripping wet, and then add a little bit of white to it. It needs to be the right consistency of water to white. If it's too wet, it'll be too messy, too dry, or too thick. You'll splatter chunks and you won't like that either. So a good consistency, a fine mist of white paint, splatter that all over, and then let your entire painting dry before going on to the next step. So when your painting is dry, you'll want to load your paint palette with Hooker's Green Hue and get a ruler. I'm going to find the center of my painting because the tree is right in the center. So this is 5.5 inches because it's an 11-inch wide canvas. And then I am going to do a vertical line, and that is going to also be half the canvas. So it's going to be 7 inches because it's a 14-inch high canvas. I'm going to place this and I'm going to look for 7. I'm going to do my line. By the way, this is a 3/8 inch angle brush and I'm using Hooker's Green Hue. I'm going to mix a teeny bit of black into that to kind of darken that up. I want this line to be a little bit darker than just that green. So it's green and white, or green and black paint. I'm going all the way up, doing a thin line at 7 inches. So now I have a vertical line at 7 inches. You need the top half of your painting to have room for the angel. That's why we only went halfway up. We're going to segment this tree out because we're going to be painting all those pine needles. So I'm going to take my angle brush and I'm going to do diagonal lines that are going up like this. So this is the top of the tree. This is like the stem, and each line I'm going to space like 2 or 3 inches apart. But you need to create those middle lines for your branches, and they need to be going diagonally up, but also they need to be gradually longer as you work your way down. So if it helps, you can draw an invisible triangle to kind of fill that in. But I did 4 diagonal lines on each side. So then I'm actually going to start at the bottom. So load my brush in that green and black combination, start at the end of your line, and then you're just stroking this outwards to create your little pine needles. And once you kind of get the hang of this, this goes a lot faster. It's not as tedious as you think. And you're just going from the end of the branch towards the center line, and this is going to look dark at first. It's not going to have a lot of contrast yet because we haven't added our lighter colors in there yet. We start with dark and then we go light. Just keep going, dragging all your little pine needles. If you want, you can mix a little bit more black into some of those just to make sure that they're nice and dark. I'm going to do the same thing to this one. Start at the end of the branch and working your way toward your center sort of trunk line of the tree. And you're allowed to get kind of sloppy with this, like your little strokes. You can press harder. You don't have to be consistent. They could be messy. They don't have to be perfectly thin pine needles. Then I'm going to actually highlight this before it dries just so you can see what's going to happen here. So I'm going to add white with my green. I'm going to go back over this. So you want to start at the end and you want to work your way towards the middle, and you're adding that lighter color in there. And that is how you get that color to pop and stand out. So I'm going to start at the end and then work my way towards the middle. So you can see once you kind of get the hang of it, it kind of, you could just brush it faster and it could get kind of messy and expressive, and that's okay. They don't have to be little tiny thin lines all throughout. So I'm going to do the same thing again to my next branch. Start right here. And you're going to think, oh, there's a lot of space in between that, and that's okay. We'll add another branch in there, and I'll show you how we'll do that. So there's my dark. And then go here again. So if you want, you can add all of your dark branches throughout and then do your light layer. I'm going to do sets of branches and then highlight those sets of branches. So I'm going to do another set down here. So you remember that kind of invisible triangle I talked about? Kind of imagine where those lines would be based on that invisible triangle, because you want this to form a Christmas tree shape and not be like a round bush or a square bush, rectangular tree. And then so you do that. And then you can do your highlight layer with your lighter color. I'm going to start with this branch, start at the end. So when you start at the end of your branch and you work your way towards the middle, it's allowing your little pine needle pieces to overlap each other. So like right there in the center, I kind of made a bunch of diagonal lines kind of going all over the place. That kind of fills your center part a little bit more. And it's okay if some of these look more like a pure white color. And then we're just going to continue this concept further. So I'm going to highlight my next set right here. And then in the center, more little diagonal lines that kind of go around in a circle. And then right here. Just using the end of the bristles for the angle brush. If you want to be able to add more brightness onto the tree, because it's a pretty dark background we're working on, You can add yellow to your palette. This is primary yellow, or if you want, you can use a color called Brilliant Yellow Green, which is a very opaque bright green. You can try adding a little bit of that on your pine needles. I'm not going to add the yellow just yet. I'm just going to have it ready when I'm ready to use it. But I want to do another set of diagonal lines between here. We just didn't add all those lines at first because I didn't want it to be super overwhelming. That's why we just did 4 lines to start out with, and then we can fill them in as we go. So again, that invisible triangle idea, make sure your lines all kind of end up forming a triangle shape for the big picture of the tree. So same thing, doing your dark and then going back to your light. So I just do like maybe a few branches at a time and then go back and highlight them. For this top part and this like in between part, I didn't add another set of branches. I just added pine needles in that area. I'm also going to add pine needles up here. These ones are just kind of going upwards for the top part of the tree. And doing my highlight. We will play around with that yellow here in just a little bit. I just want to go back and make sure these ones get the lighter highlight color. So when you're adding your highlight color, you don't have to do as many as your first round of dark branches. And then so our yellow. I'm going to rinse this all off so I can start fresh. And we want to make kind of a yellowish green color. And this is where you can also, if you have the color Brilliant Yellow Green, you can use that color instead. But this pretty much makes a brilliant yellow green. It's yellow, white, and green mixed together. You just want to go back. And you want to be kind of careful because this can take over super fast because it's a really bright color. But I'm just kind of going over where I highlighted them, but not doing as many, just a few pine needles kind of here and there throughout the tree, starting from the bottom and working your way up, and starting on the end of the branches and working your way towards the center. I'm going to add branches over here on the bottom to kind of fill in this gap on the bottom of my paintings. So I'm just going to kind of estimate what they would look like, how long they are, and then go in and kind of fill them in. Kind of out of order, but that's okay. Just so that down here there's not such a gap. And then pretty much wherever you want to kind of like fill in random little pine needles, you can. And when you're done with your tree, we've got to let this dry before we can decorate it. Let's draw our angel in. So I recommend at least the top part of your tree be dry before drawing her in. There is a trace bowl for this. If you don't feel like drawing the angel, you can definitely just trace her out. I think dark graphite paper would work for this, although you might have to use the light graphite paper if it's not showing up. And then I am using a white chalk pencil to draw her. The white chalk pencils are nice because they erase very easily, and I like that the light color shows up against a dark background. So let's start off by drawing a sort of triangular shape for her dress. So this overlaps in a curve for the top of the tree, so overlaps at top of the tree. The bottom part's a curve and it goes up and forms a triangle shape, but it's not pointed at the top, it's curved at the top. So the height of this is about 3.5 inches from the bottom to the top. I'm going to sketch her wing next. So I'm going to kind of curve up diagonally, and then the wings have kind of a rounded scalloped edging, and this goes diagonally down, connecting to her back. And then we would see her second wing. So another kind of curved line, and then we don't see the full wing. It's hidden by the front one. And I left a little gap right there because her head is going to be kind of overlapping that area anyway. So I'm going to do 2 little vertical lines for a neck and a circle for the head. We're going to do the horn next. So starting like about in the middle of the circle, maybe a little bit lower than the center part of the circle, do a line. So my line is slightly diagonal. If you want it to be more horizontal, you can do it more horizontal or have it kind of facing downwards. And then do a little curve on the end. And then these lines curve inwards from the end of the horn. And then this piece gets very, very narrow. We can keep that as a straight line, or we can make this more of a shape. So I'm going to make this a very, very thin kind of rectangular shape, and it goes a little bit past inside of her head. And then so there's where her mouth is. The nose would be above there, kind of up at an angle a little bit. I'm actually going to erase that and redo it. So there's the end of the trumpet, nose. It's like a little kind of curve that's sticking out of the head. Keep it very cartoon-like. It's not a realistic angel. And then I'm going to do her sleeve that curves out and it meets here. This is her back sleeve, so that's the back hand that's holding on to the trumpet, and her other hand is also holding to the trumpet. So this sleeve curves up and almost a triangular shape. It's narrow at the base and wide at the end, and her little hand that's also holding the trumpet. So the hands are very simplified. We don't see fingers. It's just a curved sort of shape overlapping the trumpet. We can adjust this when we paint it in later. And then I'm going to do her hair. So starting above the head, it's a little awkward because her head's kind of going up at an angle. So we want to start with kind of maybe a curled bang that's kind of curling upwards, and then it goes above that circle, down, and overlaps part of the wings. So right here is where that bang that I was talking about. And then when we paint this, we can add hair texture later. I'm going to erase all of this inside. And so we have pretty much most of that circle that we initially drew in the beginning is it's gone. It's halfway covered with hair because she's facing sideways. A little upside down curve line for eye. Next, we're going to paint the angel in. So I am going to load my palette with the color light pink. She has very pale skin, so we're going to mix a very light color. So I'm going to do light pink. I am going to add just a little bit of yellow into it as well, and a lot of white. So I'm going to switch to the number 4 round brush, and then take some pink, a whole bunch of white to it, and just a little bit of yellow. That was actually too much yellow, so I'm going to try this again. So pink, a whole bunch of white, and then you just want like a dot of yellow. So it's a very light pale color. I'm going to paint just the face. So I am going to have to go over that eye, paint the little part of the neck that's still showing, and then also paint the little nose. And then you want to go where that hair, you want to stop where that hair is. Next, I'm going to rinse my brush and I'm going to use the yellow to paint hair and trumpet. So primary yellow. And for now, we're not worried about hair texture, although we are worried about coverage. So if you're doing this solid yellow and a lot of that blue is still showing through, add a little bit of white to your brush and that's going to make that yellow look more opaque. So you're just filling in the shape of the area of her hair. And then there's that little bang curl piece that's kind of sticking up. I drew that earlier, then I erased it, so I decided I wanted to paint that in. Like how that goes to like a cute little point. It's curling upwards. So I'm going to rinse my brush. And actually, we probably didn't need to rinse the brush because we are just painting the trumpet next, and the trumpet is the exact same color. So yellow mixed with white because we want this to be nice and opaque. We don't want to have it show the background. I'm going to do that. The kind of line starts from the mouth outwards, and then kind of in the same order that we drew this. So that curve, and then these lines curve this way, and it just goes to that line, and then painting it solid. So again, adding that little bit of white in there really helps that to stand out. I'm going to make this line just a little bit thicker. Next, I'm going to rinse my brush and do black for her eye. Ideally, the face layer needs to be dry before doing this. So little tiny bit of black on the end of the brush for this fine detail. You can also do this with a black paint pen. So remember, she's kind of faced up at an angle, so that little curve is a little bit more at an angle as well. And then I did little eyelashes. I also decided to kind of slightly outline this, although I'm not super happy with the way it's outlined right there, because now it looks like she has the horn in her mouth, but we can fix that later. We can paint over that and just make it look like the end of the horn is just resting against the side of her face. We're gonna do the dress sleeve next. So a rinsed brush and titanium white, so this is just pure titanium white. Outline your shape and fill it in with curved paint strokes that go in the direction to form that triangular shape for her sleeve. I'm going to do the back sleeve as well. For this one, if we did it pure white, it would blend in too much. So I'm actually going to add a teeny tiny bit of black to it to make a super light gray color. In fact, you can even add a little bit more black to it to make it more grayish. And you want to just paint this so that it's darker because it's in the back. And then if you want, you can add more white to it, kind of blend it in, but because that part is darker, it stands out from the other sleeve. So remember, this one is behind. The other one is in front. When the trumpet dries, we can paint her hands. And then I'm going to start painting the rest of her dress. I'm going to take my 4 round, and this kind of gray color, I'm going to start it out kind of gray around the sleeve in this area. And I added a little bit of green or gray on the bottom of her sleeve. So it's a little bit more gray up here. And I'm going to drag my paint strokes down. I am going to switch here to the number 12 bright brush because we want to do this dry brush style. And the dry brush is going to give her dress that kind of delicate texture. So a little bit of paint on the end of the brush, and I'm dragging it downwards. I'm going to go outside of my lines that I drew. And when you get down to here, just very lightly release the pressure. Release the pressure, very light paint strokes. The edging is not a straight line. It's almost like it's a tulle kind of fabric. I'm going to add a little bit of Phthalo Blue to my brush. This is dried up by now, so I'm going to add a little bit of blue to my palette and just a teeny tiny bit of blue on my brush. You don't want a lot. I'm just going to go in here and lightly brush on some blue. If we did too much blue on this, it's going to blend right into the background. We don't want that. We still want this to be very light in color, and that blue just adds more kind of variation in that color. It gives it kind of a light bluish white color. I'm going to drag some more down. You can use your brush on its side to create some thinner paint strokes. And then up here as well. Maybe add a little bit of blue to the bottom of her sleeves or a little bit of shadowing. But again, you don't want it to blend too much into the background. So make sure it's still much lighter than the background. I'm going to paint her wings in next, and we don't need to rinse the brush unless there's way too much blue on the brush, but so there's not a lot of blue in her wings. I'm going to load my palette with fresh titanium white, still using the 12 bright brush. I'm going to make sure that this is not blue and it's mostly white. Basically, the first layer, I'm just going to paint solid white, so you can outline the shape of the wing, and then you can paint it in solid. Before this dries, I'm going to do a little black outline on the inner part of the wing. So you can also do this with the round brush if it's easier to kind of control the brush, but I just added a teeny bit of black on the end of this brush, and I'm doing an outline of that inner part of the scalloped edges of her wings, and I'm just going to drag it inwards. It is going to make that part just a little bit darker. We can always kind of lighten it up if it's too dark, but just drag that in towards the middle. And then I'm going to grab my round brush and go back and re-outline this edging to make sure. So this is just pure titanium white. I'm just going to make sure that this is nice and bright. And then up here as well, I'm going to drag paint strokes here at the base, but they're going to go kind of in a diagonal direction towards that kind of darker area. And my brush is actually grabbing a little bit of gray. That's why those lines look a little bit gray, but that's okay. We have some variation in color, so it's not just pure white. It's just a very, very light gray color with lines going in a diagonal direction. And then our back wing over here, I'm just going to do solid white and then grab black and do this part right here a little bit more gray so that it's a little bit darker because it's in the back. Then we can go back and touch up the front wing later and add that kind of white outline that it kind of ended up covering up. Next, I'm going to do the detail on her hair. So I'm going to use a clean number 4 round brush, and I'm going to mix white with yellow and maybe a little bit even more white so it's an extra bright yellow. And I'm just going to go in and paint some little hair texture pieces that are kind of curving and going to a point, and they're all kind of going in the direction of the shape of her hair. So that first layer is darker, and I don't want to cover up all of that first layer, and just adding strands with this lighter color. And then I'm going to grab more yellow and just kind of go over and just add more strands. I am going to add the color Raw Sienna to my palette. So this Raw Sienna can act as kind of a darker color for some of the like darker strands in her hair and also help give that more texture. So I'm just kind of loosely painting little wavy pieces with that dark, trying not to overdo it. Sometimes that's hard when we paint hair. We just want to keep painting more and more hair texture. We are going to paint her hands next, so we want to kind of remake that pale color that we used earlier when we painted her face. And it's that white with a little pink and a teeny tiny bit of yellow. And then go in here, still the number 4 round brush, by the way. I'm doing her front hand first, so this part overlaps the trumpet. And then this back hand, it's going to be behind the trumpet, but we see the top part of her hand. And if you want, you can have the top part overlap it a little bit to make it look like her hands are kind of folded over, or just don't do that. Just make it look like it's behind the trumpet. I'm going to add highlights and kind of a second coat to the trumpet. So I'm going to rinse and go back to the primary yellow. Just going to go and kind of redo that curve right there and grab white. So with the white, we're going to use the white to highlight the trumpet to kind of give it a shiny look. I'm going to add the shiny part on the top of the trumpet and on that curved part of the trumpet. So this isn't pure white, it's yellow mixed with more white because there was yellow initially on my brush, and I added white. And right here, this top part, highlight. Then I'm going to actually grab a little bit more yellow, and right here, I want to kind of blend in that really light color with the yellow. And then I'm going to grab Raw Sienna. So that's that kind of light brown color. And on the bottom part of the trumpet, I'm going to add shadowing. So blending this very super light brown color. If your brush got overloaded, you could actually wipe the brush off or rinse it and then add your light brown. I'm going to do a little bit of outlining next using the Phthalo Blue. So I'm going to get my number 4 round brush cleaned off and load just the end of it and a little bit of that blue. And I want to outline this part of the sleeve right here and this bottom part. So just pure dark blue. And then right here, maybe a little bit over here. If there's anywhere else you want to kind of outline to help that stand out, it's hard because we have a lot of white on white. So using blue and gray to kind of outline helps to get that parts to kind of stand out. I'm going to load gold onto my paint palette next. So gold is optional, but it does add a really pretty metallic sheen to this. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to use my number 4 round brush all cleaned off and load that into the gold paint. I'm going to start by accenting her wings with gold. So I'm going to start over here, and this also helps to kind of lighten up this area where that's kind of dark. So pretty much wherever I painted that black, I'm going back over with gold paint. So outlining those kind of curved scalloped edges that we outlined with dark gray, black earlier. And then I'm dragging this gold paint over that dark color. It is lightening it up. I'm just kind of dragging it, and it's kind of just disappearing into the rest of the wings. And I'm going to do a little bit over here on this wing as well. Gold is a very translucent color. It works best when you add it on top of a color, so it looks nice added on like a dark color or whatever solid color you have as the base. Adding it on it gives it that kind of translucent sheen over your color. I'm going to add the same kind of gold to the bottom part of her dress, so still adding little bits of gold to the end of my brush. I actually loaded my brush in a little bit of white as well, so gold and white. It kind of gives it a different, more opaque effect. Alternatively, you can just use gold and not gold and white if you like the look of the translucent gold. I'm going to do a little more outlining next, but this time with the black. There's a couple more things I wanted to outline, including like her neck side of the hair right here, just very, very lightly. It's not a bold black outline at all. I just outlined a very thin line on her hair, like where the hair and the face meet, so that kind of stands out better. If you have a fine tip black paint pen, you can also do this with the black paint pen. I outlined her neck and chin, and then I'm going to outline her hands too, and that's going to help that stand out, especially since the hands are such a close color to the color of the trumpet. But just, you don't even have to outline the entire shape. You can outline the end of the sleeve and just one side of the hand, and that's just enough to get that to stand out. I'm going to go and touch up the horn mouthpiece area. When I outlined that earlier, I wasn't too happy with the way that outline worked. So now that that's dry, I'm going to go back with this pale color and just go paint over that. So the mouthpiece is resting on the side of her head. So you don't see that outline anymore. And then we can start painting the ornaments. So we're really going to bring the magic into this painting with the decorative tree. Before we can do colors for the ornaments, you need to paint them white. So I'm using a number 4 round brush and titanium white, and I'm just painting little circles. If you want to make the ornaments bigger, you can. I'm also going to paint stars in the sky, and I'll use a combination of the 4 round, and I'll bring out the 8 round for this. And the 8 round is going to help create the fine details on the stars. So some of these stars are just dots. Some of these stars, I'm going to get my 8 round brush and show you. I'm going to paint longer lines for the stars. So because this brush has a really fine point to it, I'm able to take this and drag vertical and horizontal marks and diagonal marks, and that creates a little twinkle in the star. So you do your dot and then you drag this brush. Are you just using the very, very tip of this brush because it's such a fine point, and you're dragging your little lines outwards, vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. I usually make the vertical and horizontal marks a little bit longer. If you want, you can make a 1 star exceptionally bigger. So you can do it the northern star if you want. I'm just doing a bunch of twinkling stars pretty much everywhere. It really adds to the magic of this painting with the twinkling stars, and we will add lights on the tree as well, which really makes it look very pretty. When you're done with the stars, it looks sort of like this. I'm going to do something else to the trumpet here. I'm going to add like a little mouthpiece. I ended up changing my mind about this later again too. But if you want it to look like there's like a little, you can see the little mouthpiece against her face, you can just do like a little kind of curve or straight line. And then there we can see the mouthpiece of the trumpet. Also optional. When your ornaments are dry, then you can paint them in, and I'm talking bone dry. That white cannot be wet at all because then it's going to mix and it's not going to look as bright. So when your ornaments are dry, just paint them in. This is Napthol Crimson, really pretty bright red. If you want, you can do all red ornaments. I decided to do all sorts of colors. This is the only time we see Napthol Crimson in the painting. Same with Deep Violet. So rinse every time you want to switch colors. So I did 3 red ornaments. I'm going to do purple. So you're just painting that in solid. You can customize these colors. You don't have to use the exact colors that I'm using. You can also make up colors. So with the blue, I decided to mix white with the blue to make it more of a light blue color. So this is Phthalo Blue and Titanium White mixed together. I was a little worried the blue wouldn't really show up, but it does. You can mix. So this one I mixed blue and purple together, so it's more of like a bluish purple. And then I'm going to do a green ornament. Or yellow. Let's do yellow. Green sometimes is tricky just because the tree is green, so I wanted all the ornaments to show up. So a random yellow ornament. And then I'm going to do gold for a garland. And so this is gold and my number 4 round brush. You can also use the back of your paintbrush to make these dots instead of using the bristles. You can just stamp all these dots. But I'm basically doing little gold dots very close to each other, and they're making like rows going diagonally but curved in a kind of a zigzag formation, and this creates this garland on the tree. For the ornaments, we don't have to paint each individual little hook on the ornaments, but I decided to take the gold and just do like a little vertical column of like 2 or 3 dots for each of the ornaments. Again, that is optional. If you don't want to do that detail, you don't have to. The ornaments are going to look amazing once we highlight and shadow them, but we got to wait until they dry completely before we can do that. While things are still drying, I am going to do the lights, and these lights are super fun. So you just take a little bit of yellow paint on your brush or on your finger. You just don't want too much. You don't want it to get really big or messy. Just a teeny tiny bit of paint, and you're just smearing it outwards. This is going to create the glow for our lights. So once you're done creating a whole bunch of like blurry yellow dots, then you go back over with your round brush and your titanium white, and you're just adding a little white dot in the middle of those, and you can smear those as well, and that actually adds another level of brightness to your lights. You can go back and smear your little tiny white dot, and then go back and do one more final white dot in the middle of all of that, and that's how you create lights on your Christmas tree. Then I'm going to go back and add some more stars. These ones are just going to be simple dots, kind of scattered all throughout, especially down here where it's kind of dark. Add some more twinkle and sparkle to the background. If you want to do a halo, I recommend drawing it out first with the white chalk pencil. I'm going to make the halo a little bit angled just because she's sort of angled up a little bit. But if you want to do it flat, you can, depending on what direction her head ended up for you. And then after drawing it out, just use yellow and white to kind of outline it. You really don't have to go over it multiple times with multiple coats of paint like I'm doing. Just one outline and you should be good to go. If you end up making the halo too big, you can always go back, and when that dries, you can use the background color and you can go back and just edit that. Like if you want more of a gap right here or on the inside, you can just take your background color and paint over it. When your ornaments are dry, you can highlight them. So just use your plain titanium white and the number 4 round brush. And I do this like, you can just do like a little curve, or if you want, you can make it more of like a squiggly shape just on the like upper left part of each of the circles. Just make sure that it's, when you're painting, that they really are dry. Otherwise you'll get like colored splotches in some of them. Then for the shadow part of the ornament, rinse your brush off and grab black, and on the lower left part of each of the circles, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're just doing this little kind of curved marks, and you're adding those, sorry for the shaky camera, you're adding those just on the lower left part, just a little bit of darkness, shadow. It really makes these ornaments look shiny. And this is the conclusion of our Christmas tree angel. So I did off camera edit her horn again. I took the mouthpiece off, so it's just that against her face. I thought it looked better that way. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.